Tweet at Today SOR.
You're in the wrong part of Ireland. That's the message that the DUP MP Ian Paisley wants tourists at Dublin Airport to be met with as they step off the plane. Have a listen to this.
It's been put to me this, that 70% of Dublin Airport's marketing budget on the island is spent in Northern Ireland to attract people when they arrive in Belfast, either Aldergrove or Belfast City, to go south. And I'm just wondering, should we have an aggressive marketing strategy that says whenever you get off a plane in Dublin, visit Derry, visit Belfast, visit the Causeway, why aren't you going north? And put it right back in their face? Because, I mean, the most obvious song that most Irish Americans sing is "Oh Danny Boy." It's nothing to do with the Republic of Ireland, it's all to do with Northern Ireland. I mean, why aren't we having an aggressive strategy which says that every single Irish American that arrives in Dublin, you're in the wrong part of the island, you need to be up north?
That was Ian Paisley speaking recently at a hearing of a Commons committee, and he wants a whole new strategy to make sure Northern Ireland gets a fair crack at attracting tourists who are visiting the island. So, does he have a point? And how should Northern Ireland be marketed internationally versus the rest of the island? Joining me now from Belfast is Ben Lowry, Deputy Editor of the Belfast Newsletter. In studio, I am joined by Jim Deegan, Director of Rail Tours Ireland, First Class Limited, and a former travel advisor with Bord Fáilte. And on the line is Eoghan Corry, Editor of Travel Extra. Jim Deegan, as somebody working in the industry, does Ian Paisley have a point?
Well, absolutely not. It's total rubbish, actually, because Northern Ireland is marketed overseas as part of the island of Ireland by Tourism Ireland, which is a product of the Good Friday Agreement. And we, the Irish trade, the Republic of Irish Trade, when we interact with Tourism Ireland, we find that there is a mild irritation at the positive discrimination that Tourism Ireland shows towards Northern Ireland. I've just come back from a trade mission in the US. Of the 15 trade, 5 were from Northern Ireland, and when we go to cities in the States, if we're in Washington, the Irish ambassador is there, as is the British ambassador, because we're an all-Ireland organisation. When we go to other cities, the Irish Consul General is there, as is the British Consul General. So Northern Ireland is given far more than its fair share, in our view, coverage in overseas marketing.
I'm Larry of the newsletter. Do you share Ian Paisley Jr.'s view that, effectively tourists are being poached from Northern Ireland?
Well, not saying that I would share that view, but I'm sympathetic to the thrust of what he was saying, which is that we should unembarrassedly promote Northern Ireland. By the way, we ran a letter from Dublin Airport shortly afterwards saying that was entirely wrong, what he had said about the budget and about the advertising in Northern Ireland. And they made a very good case, Dublin Airport. And indeed, part of the problems that we have in Northern Ireland are because we've screwed up our airport provision, because in typical Northern Ireland form, we have all things to all men and 3 airports for a small place. And therefore, we're losing massive amounts of business to Dublin Airport, which is an international hub, and getting better and better, where you've done almost everything right, having a motorway in all directions. So part of our problems are indeed related to the airports, and that's nobody's fault apart from our own. However, the point about the distinction in Northern Ireland, and it was very interesting here, just there to hear about Tourism Ireland and this business after the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, this notion that actually Northern Ireland gets positive discrimination. We ran an article a few years ago from Kate Hoey, MP, who's a very big friend of Northern Ireland. She's Northern Irish, indeed. And she was complaining about somebody having been pointed to a Tourism Ireland stall at an international event and having to ask about the Giant's Causeway. I don't want to say whether or not Tourism Ireland is doing it right. I think it needs an academic study, but there are different views on this. And I certainly would be concerned about the wisdom, it's post the 1998 agreement, of marketing the whole island. You know, why do we have to have a daft situation where there's a British ambassador and an Irish ambassador sitting together.
But
Why
what
can't
about
we market Northern Ireland on its own as Northern Ireland in a friendly way? Not you're in the wrong part of the island, but don't forget to come to the other part of the island. Because one of the things about tourists is they do notice the difference. They intuitively see when they come up here. I remember not so long ago bumping into two Spanish people who had just driven up in the motorway and were parking, and immediately noticed the difference in feel between Belfast and Dublin. I mean, Belfast still has that industrial city feel. It can't possibly compete with Dublin in terms of...
But it is different, as indeed Derry is different. They both have wonderfully attractive features, as indeed do other parts of Northern Ireland. Just to bring in Eoghan Corry on this, what about that idea there we heard from Ben Lowry, the idea that Northern Ireland should market itself separately from the rest of the island? Would that be a smart move?
It's actually to Northern Ireland's advantage, Sean, that they are marketed as part of Ireland. Tourism Ireland's marketing is pretty much best in class across the industry. We would perform very well in inbound visitors, and since the Good Friday Agreement, the flood of visitors into Northern Ireland has been increasing disproportionately to other parts. But Ben has a point, and Ian has a point. Tourism Ireland, the places people come, and it's Tourism Ireland's problem for right across the island, is very pockmarked. The interesting thing is Ian's constituency, Antrim, is the fifth most visited county in the island. But Tourism Ireland has a problem that 5 or 6 counties are taking the vast majority of visitors. Starts with Dublin, down through Galway, Cork and Kerry, and then you see Antrim. But when you go to Longford, they are the least visited. The next one up of the 32 is Fermanagh. So we have a pockmarked problem in the island. Which is
extraordinary given the beauty of that county.
Absolutely, and if marketing solved it, by the way, Sean, all you have to do is put the Corley Trackway and the Marble Arch instead of the Giant's Causeway and the Cliffs of Moher into the marketing, but it doesn't really work like that. It's much more complex. And bringing people in and all out of the island, this is close to Ian's original point, needs a big, credible airport, not an airport that can just run people in from London, but someone that can offer the sort of variety of routes, a critical scale that Dublin Airport has only achieved in recent times, where it has Beijing and Doha and places like Minneapolis, which wouldn't have a direct flight to a smaller airport. One big airport in Dublin is good for all of the island. And while, with the rhetoric that Ian engaged in, it's actually not unusual, because the Midlands of Ireland come out with the same thing, saying, who's thinking of us? You're going in the wrong part of the country. But we do have 2 major tourist attractions in the top 10 on the island. In the Giant's Causeway, it's number 5. The Titanic Centre is number 8. And both of them are in DUP heartlands. So the sort of rhetoric that there's some sort of betrayal going on, I don't think it washes, but that does not remove the fact there is a problem with the likes of Derry getting half the number of tourists that Donegal is getting. We don't want fewer to come to Donegal, but we do want to spread the largesse, because it is also tackling other major, not just in Ireland, major industries for the tourism industry internationally, of over-tourism and sustainability in tourism. The village of Doolin, for instance, is choking for 6 weeks of the year. It wants fewer visitors in July and more in January. The Giant's Causeway, there's been a major report launched in the last week into the impact of too many tourists on the Antrim coastline. They're the sort of big questions facing us, and spreading the tourism largesse is in the interest of everyone. I'm certainly with Ian and Ben on that, and I do think that there'll be a lot of listeners in parts of the country that are not getting large numbers of visitors who would agree that everything has to be spread.
Is that a fair point, Ben Lowry, that you have that concentration? Ironically enough, the county that does best, or at least it's in the top 6, is Antrim, Giant's Causeway. Yeah. You've got obviously the attractions of the Titanic Centre, and now of course Game of Thrones as well, the attractions there. But
yes, I think that is a very good point, and it's a very important point. I vividly remember American friends of ours visiting in the 1970s, which was just the very beginning. The worst of the troubles was 1972, of some sort of re-emergence of...
Oh, we've lost Ben there. I think Jim Deegan, to come back to you, I know you formerly worked as a travel advisor with Bord Fáilte before becoming Director of Rail Tours Ireland First Class Limited. Again, do you feel it's somehow constrained? I think got that sense from your first answer that you have to have the British ambassador there. I mean, would going our separate ways, despite that it would run counter to the Good Friday Agreement and the spirit thereof, would it be more effective from your point of view?
Well, we, as I said, we experienced sort of mild irritation at this positive discrimination. But generally speaking, Tourism Ireland do a fantastic job at what they were set out to do, which was to market the island of Ireland overseas. And we as a tour operator find that like Eoghan, actually number one attraction in Ireland outside Dublin is the Cliffs of Moher. Number two is Cork and Blarney. And number three is the Giant's Causeway. And then, of course, a lot of other very big attractions like Titanic in Belfast, the Game of Thrones. So we have, out of our repertoire, we've got 8 tours dealing with Northern Ireland by rail from Dublin. And it's interesting, Ben mentioned the Irish Americans. Well, about Northern Ireland being a separate place. Sometimes, as we're travelling north on the Enterprise, and we pass milepost 59, which is the border, and there's a big white post on both sides of the line there marking the border, and we do get the odd reference from particularly Irish American guests that might remark something about, are we now in occupied Ireland?
Ben is back on the line. Ben, thanks for rejoining us. Tell me more about how you think Northern Ireland should market itself then.
I'm not sure where you lost me the last time, but I think that what I was saying is that it is a distinct place. Another random example, my aunt who lives in Boston brought over an Israeli friend and really wanted to see murals that had been painted over and that had been painted over into positive murals, and they were actually rather disappointed that they didn't get to see the more confrontational murals. So it is the difference. It is the fact that for hundreds of years there's been this distinct two identities and so on that draws a lot of people, and I'm just saying that we shouldn't be embarrassed about marketing that and emphasising the different parts of the island. As it happens, one of my favourite parts of Ireland is West Cork, so we've got serious competition with other parts of Ireland for what we're doing. I'm just saying we mustn't, from our perspective, drop into another thing that annoys me. I was in somewhere recently that's selling merchandise in Belfast, and it has shamrocks and stuff. Yes, of course that's part of the Irish identity, but there's another identity up here that's totally different, and we want to show people other things, and we want to market it as being part of the Northern Ireland.
That's what sells. I mean, Ian Paisley, the late Ian Paisley Senior, I think he described St. Patrick as a Protestant.
Yes,
well,
yes,
of course.
Yes, of course. I'm just talking about. I'm talking about not being embarrassed about the distinct identity that there is in this part of the island that is currently Northern Ireland. Use of the phrase Northern Ireland, as well. We're not the north of Ireland. I mean, we are the north of Ireland as a geographical entity, but we are also distinct.
But mind you, he did say Derry as well, Ian Jr.
There should be any embarrassment about that.
Times are changing. He talked about people going to Derry.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Yeah, he did say that.
Eoghan Corry, I'll give you the last brief word. I suppose the all-island thing has a certain attractiveness, maybe pragmatism as well.
It is absolutely pragmatic, and we've had a long battle by Scotland to disengage from being swallowed up in British marketing. But there's really a slightly tangential point, but it is really important on that separate identity. The only part of Northern Europe where hotel prices plummet in July is Northern Ireland. The reason is everybody is trying to get out of the place because of the parading of sectarian and exclusive symbols. Now, we've seen a huge movement, including by Ian Paisley and especially by the Orange Order, to take the harder edge off that and celebrate the more cultural side of it. But it's going to take a long while, and I think that in tourism terms, to start talking about parading the separate identity is absolute madness. We should be actually bringing things that do not make tourists feel uncomfortable. They are the sort of things that should be celebrated across Northern Ireland.
Okay.
speaking to you guys from Catalonia today, there's a real sense of menace in Catalan politics, and it's never good for tourism.
Right, we'll leave it there. My thanks to all three of you. Eoghan Corry, latterly editor of Travel Extra. Thanks as well to Ben Lowry, deputy editor of the Belfast Newsletter, and to Jim Deegan, director of Rail Tours Ireland. We'll take a break and then we'll have more song.
Today with Sean O'Rourke on RTE Radio 1.